Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. This is episode 49, and I'm your host, Brian Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. Be sure to like and share the program as well. You can also support the program by going to Anchor FM or Spotify and clicking the support button. Also, become a program sponsor today. Program sponsorships include a custom written script to advertise your business to its fullest potential to get the results you're looking for. Let me help you market your business and advertise right here on this program today. To learn more, email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com. That's thetallybill@gmail.com. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. Donna Michaels has had a distinguished career, which began by serving in the U.S. Navy and followed by 21 years in law enforcement, which she is now retired from. After being diagnosed with PTSD in 2017, she began a journey to find answers to questions she had struggled with for years. In the course of doing so, she started to journal, and before she knew it, she had written a book. Her discovery has not only allowed her to find the answers she was looking for, but to also share her story so she could help others as well. She credits the strength of her never quit mentality to the 3 years she spent working alongside the Navy SEALs. There, she established enduring friendships that would eventually save her life. Donna spent much of the past 2 decades in law enforcement, helping others in crisis from various mental health problems. She is a crisis intervention officer, critical incident stress management member, and is all too familiar with how traumatic events can affect anyone, even the bravest and strongest among us. In an effort to erase the stigma of PTSD, Donna hopes to not only encourage those to get help who battle with their own invisible wounds, but also help the general public gain a better understanding of PTSD and not to fear those who have it. And with that, we are honored to be joined by Donna Michaels. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to come on the show to talk to us today about, some very important topics that sometimes people have a hard time talking about. And that's the reason why we have a serious epidemic going on in our country today with veteran suicide, with first responder suicide, and really suicide among the greater population of our country. Really anybody, including children. They are faced with some very difficult times, as well as social media, is turning a lot of kids into living this life of perfection, and they are even taking their own lives at a level that we have never seen. So I think this is going to be a very informative chat we're going to have today, and I think we can add some real life value to the folks out there who may need it the most and are searching for perhaps some answers or even some ways that they can help their loved ones going through their own crisis, as well. And I know you have a lot of knowledge there. So yeah, I'd like to get started. I know we've got a lot to talk about here, but before we dig in, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. Where are you from, and how was life growing up as a kid?
Well, I'm originally from the Space Coast in Florida, near the Space Center. Grew here, born and raised here till I was 13, and my parents packed up everything, and we moved to very rural Western North Carolina, which was a dramatic change of lifestyle. I talk about it a little bit in my book. My dad was a paranoid schizophrenic, but when you're growing up in a house with a dysfunctional family or someone who has an undiagnosed mental disorder, you don't really even realize that that's not normal until you kind of get out in the world and experience, other families and see other people. And you kind of realize that, hey, something's not right. My family isn't like everybody else's. So I joined the Navy right out of high school. I had a strong desire to serve my country. I'm fourth generation U.S. Navy, first female. And I really wanted to see the world, and I just didn't want to learn about it through a book. I wasn't, I was a smart kid. My grades, I did fine. I just really didn't have any desire to go to college. I wanted to go out and learn it on my own.
The Space Coast.
Yeah.
That is cool. I've never heard that term before. And you're still down there in Florida?
Full circle. Yeah, it took left in 83 and I returned in 2014. So it took me 31 years to make full circle, but I did it. Is that right? Did I do my math right? 31 years, I think.
Hey, it's okay.
Yeah, I suck at math.
I'm a Marine, so you can tell me 2 + 2 is 5, and I'll be like, okay.
Yeah, no, math is not my forte. But yeah, no, I was living in Orlando when I first got out of the Navy. I ended up settling there, which is where I worked. That's where I was in law enforcement. And it got to the point where I couldn't even take my dog for a walk or go check the mail. And people recognized me and would knock on my door at 1 o'clock in the morning over a domestic violence. Their husband came home drunk. I'm like, dude, call 911. We're not, I'm off duty. I'm sleeping. Leave me alone, So right. I got to where I felt like I couldn't get off duty. I felt like I was always on duty. Just taking the garbage out once. There's a drug house down the street and they were literally doing a drug deal by my patrol car that was sitting in the driveway. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me right now? So I was like, I'm done. I can't raise my kid here. So I moved out of the county in 2014. My daughter was in the 3rd grade at the time. And I decided that I wanted to raise her where I was raised. So the Space Coast, Brevard County is only, and I worked the east side of Orange County and our counties butt up against each other. So for work, it was only like a 45-minute drive for me, and it was through the country, and it beat the busy expressways and the city chaos. And best move I ever made. Definitely. I love where I live. The Space Coast. We call it the Space Coast here, just Space Center, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm in Houston, so it's kind of cool.
Houston, we have a problem.
Well, we're going to try to avoid those today. But I do like that. So you are a 4th generation sailor.
Yes.
So, you said you wanted to join the military at a young age so you could serve your country. What inspired you to join the Navy? I mean, I know you have some family roots that are, deeply rooted in 4th generation, but did any other branch ever really stick out to you, or were you full board? I am Navy all the way.
Yeah, in my mind, I had heard so many great stories from my dad and my grandpa. My grandpa on my mother's side, and of course my father. So it was both sides of the family. And my grandpa was a World War II Seavey and cleared. They built what's now the naval base on Guam. So he was in Guam. And so between my grandpa didn't tell a lot of stories because it was World War II. But when he did tell a story, it was fascinating. My dad had wonderful stories from doing med cruises through Europe. And I always had a strong desire to see Europe, specifically Italy was where I was passionate about going. So I don't know. All I ever knew and heard about was the Navy. So for me, it was just a given. I couldn't even tell you the first thing about any other branch.
Well, the Navy's great. I was on some naval ships and, they're good transport for sure. And they have a lot of great jobs over there in the Navy. What was your job? What was your MOS in the Navy?
Okay. I got to give you crap about giving us great rides. We're about ready to get into that squid versus Marine, banter. But my job was actually, I never did sea duty. I never stepped foot on a ship because during the time that I was in, females weren't allowed to go into combat roles or combat ships or anything. So my first duty station was the Azores. I was there for 15 months. I was a yeoman, which is an administrative rating. So we worked directly for the COs of the command or the base. And and took care of everything from, non-judicial punishment, captain's mass to this maintaining security files, security clearances, getting people paid for deployments, the money, awards, just all that stuff that would come right out of the skipper's office.
Mm-hmm. So when your time came to an end in the Navy, what was your transition like from going to being a sailor to being, representing the United States Navy to transitioning over to that civilian world?
It was tough. It was really, really tough. And it was tough because it was 1993 and we didn't have any of the transition programs that are in place today. And there was nothing like that. And I had fought to stay in. I really wanted to stay in the military, but it was the early Clinton administration where they were doing the major defensive budget cutbacks. And because women couldn't go into combat roles, they didn't have enough female yeomen to go onto destroyers, aircraft carriers, and, the battleships and whatnot. So I was a first termer in my rating, and they basically told me that I needed to change rates or get out of the Navy. Well, the only rates available were ones that I had no business in or any type of a desire to do. I really I was in the spec war community working with SEALs. So as you may or may not know, you've got the fleet Navy, the regular Navy, and then you've got the special operations community. And they are very, very different from the general population of the regular branch. So we were a very small, tight-knit family. These were my brothers. I had endorsements all the way up to the drawing a blank on the type, but the top, the admiral in charge of special warfare at spec war over in Coronado. And, glowing endorsements all the way up to go to Bupers and ask for a waiver, because the conditions were you had to have taken the E5 exam in order to reenlist. And I was 2 weeks shy based on when my EAOS was. So they were requesting a waiver on my behalf. And 3 days before my enlistment ended, Bupers came back and said, denied. So we all thought it was going to go through. We all did. So unfortunately it didn't. So I ended up giving my best friend and my roommate a power of attorney to ship my car back and all my belongings. And it was just like, I was here today. They threw an impromptu going away party for me. And I was on the next plane out and to Norfolk to process out of Norfolk. And when I got there, I got thrown into some barracks with some fleet Navy people. A lot of them were being kicked out of the Navy. And it was unpleasant. It was very unpleasant. I was not happy with that out process at all. In fact, I never even got before a VA rater to get rated any type of disability. And I had some injuries when I was in, but I never even saw a rater, nothing. So then I got back home to my parents, and it was the dead of winter. There was a huge snowstorm that blew through. We were snowed in for like 3 weeks, and they couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. My dad was full blown crazy by this point, and because I had been out on my own and independent, I had grown a pair, for lack of a better word. Sorry. And I stood up to him, and we were at each other's throats because I wasn't having it, Soon as I was able to get out of there, I got a job in Atlanta, and I had an uncle who worked in HR for a big company in Atlanta. And he if it wasn't for him, I really don't know what I would have done. He kind of took me under his wing, helped me write a resume, and interview. And I landed. My first job was with a law firm. That didn't last very long because I saw some things that ethically I had issues with, and I didn't want to be part of it. So I resigned. And then I got a job for an agricultural company in an administrative position, and it was incredibly boring. And I was working with much people 30 years older than me, and I had nothing in common with them. Didn't understand each other's languages, from the way we are in the military to the way the corporate world was. It was tough. And then I ended up in Florida getting my real estate license and got sucked into the timeshare industry where when my mom left my dad, she came down here, got her license. So I kind of came to Florida, joined my mom's side of the family in the timeshare industry. And I did that for 7 years, just floundering and partying through my 20s until I got into law enforcement at the age of 30. Last thing I ever thought I'd be doing. That was law enforcement was never on my radar at all.
What inspired you to go to the police academy and become a police officer? I mean, and you would end up serving 21 years as a police officer. So there must have been something in there that said, you know what? I think I'm being called to serve here once again, and actually become a part of the team. And again, to serve that community, and really, your life has been a public servant for probably more than half of your life. Describe that decision, and describe when you made that decision to say, I'm going to go to police academy and I'm going to become a police officer.
Yeah, no, I can remember it vividly. So I had taken, well, working in the time industry, I worked on commission. And so it's hard when you're been in the military and, you get paid on the 1st and the 15th of every month, and you know how to budget. Going into a job where you get paid strictly on commission, I never did get the hang of it. It was like, more got ahead and then you were behind again, because you never knew when that next check was coming. So I would go get part-time jobs, and I was working at a wind tunnel as a skydiving or wind tunnel instructor, which is like, free fall instructor, but in a wind tunnel. I did that. And then I landed a job at a popular jewelry store in the mall. And while I was working that gig, there would always be off-duty officers working the mall to, deter theft and things like that. And these were actual police officers, not mall cops. These were deputy sheriffs. And there was this one sergeant, and he would always, on his foot patrol, would walk in and just, hang out and talk. And after talking for a while, I was really struggling and I felt really, really lost. I was 29 at the time, and I knew I had figured out that what I was doing wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I really deeply, deeply missed serving a purpose. And that was something that the spec war community gave me. The SEALs are amazing human beings. They, are these badass operators and do these incredible things. And here I had was, an admin job, and they always treated every member of that unit, whether you were the supply clerk, the admin person, whether you had a trident or not, you were an equal part of that team. And they treated you like you were absolutely essential, and they couldn't do their job without you. So it was very rewarding. And back then it was the drug wars with the Colombian cartels and all that stuff. So every op the guys went on and would do, and I would type the after action reports. Like, I knew I was part of the greater good. I knew that I was making a difference, keeping drugs from coming into our country. Right. So when I left the military, I really, really missed that purpose and being part of the greater good. So in talking to this sergeant that would come in, like I said, law enforcement was never in a million years on my radar. I'd had some bad encounters with some certain police officers that let the power go to their head, and they were kind of arrogant jerks. Right. And I just honestly didn't have a very good opinion because of the faults of a few. Right. But this sergeant and I hit it off, and he was a Marine. Actually, he had served in the military. So we had that in common. And he's like, so what are you going to do with your life? Is this it? And I'm like, no, I can't figure it out. And I told him what I missed about the military. He goes, that's why I've been in law enforcement, for at that point, he'd been in for well over 20 years. And I said, I don't understand something. I said, you complain about your job all the time. You complain about this and that. I said, but and you turn around and tell me it's the greatest job in the world. I'm like, help me understand why. And he gave me the list of why it was the greatest job in the world, and it was everything on my list I was looking for: being part of the greater good, being part of the team, the brotherhood, the camaraderie, there was nothing monotonous about it. Never knew every day what you were going to get into, and that was everything that I was really looking for. So he invited me to do a ride along with one of his female deputies. And it was a midnight shift, and I was hooked. Right away. I'm like, yep, this is what I want to do. And next thing I know, I was in the academy and I started the academy at age 29, turned 30 while I was in the academy, and was sworn in before I turned 31.
Very interesting. It's like as if you were looking for that structure. You're looking for that structure again, and that discipline, as you said, that team,
Mhm.
and as obviously everybody knows that being a police officer is one, it's very rewarding, and two, it's very stressful.
Yeah.
Now, walk me through graduating, okay, and earning your badge
Okay.
and getting sent out there as a rookie police officer. Do you have any experiences that you'd like to share with us your first year or two and that kind of molded who you are today and how this puts you on the path to serving 21 years as a police officer?
That's an awesome question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. So thank you for that. So having been worked with the SEALs, they taught me, even though I was a pencil pusher, they taught me about firearms. And if anybody were to Google the name Herschel Davis, he's been on Discovery Channel a million times. He travels the country, and he's a firearms, one of the best, old school Vietnam era, salty sailor, nothing gets sugar coated. Let's put it that way. So, so Herschel had actually taken me out to the range and taught me one-on-one how to shoot, because the first time I went out was with a platoon of guys, and it was very intimidating. I was only 20 years old. I'd shot my dad's gun a few times in my life, but never had any kind of formal training really. And the Navy didn't do that in boot camp, right? So I kind of freaked out. I had a little bit of a panic attack. So Herschel took me out the next day and straightened me out and had me shooting expert by the end of the day. And after that, I loved it. So every chance I got to go shooting, I was on that gun range. I absolutely loved it. So fast forward to the academy, I learned real quick that you don't ever brag, because sure enough, you'll eat those words. So I just kind of went in, I guess, as the sleeper, because we had a couple Marines in there, a couple Army guys, and I went in and I just kind of like aced every course of fire. And I ended up graduating the top shooter, the top gun, as they call it, in my academy class, which, upset a couple of the Marines. So that a girl and a squid beat him on the gun range. But it was a title I was really, really proud to receive, and my family was really proud of me too. So I was the treasurer of my academy class. So I was in charge of all the fundraising and stuff like that. I did well academically, in the top, I think I was in the top 3% of my class. And the academy was good. It was good. The hardest part, but for me, I've never been a runner. I'm a terrible runner. So the hardest part for me was always the runs. And I was one of the oldest in my class, not the oldest, but I was definitely towards the top. Most of them were right out of the military or college. So I had about a decade, not quite a decade on most of them, but, so I got through that, and then I got into the FTO process, which is the Field Training Officer Program. And back then it was 17 weeks, I think. It's changed a few times since then. I can't remember. But it was approximately 4 months, and on the road. So you had your week 0, which was all your admin time and qualifying at the range and all that stuff. And then after that, you went onto the road. And I had very old school FTOs. Things were done that nobody would ever get away with today. And to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't have it any other way. The rule where if you're in a patrol car, you never pull up side by side with another vehicle, window to window. You always are slightly offset, not side by side. You know how that's a safety thing.
Sure, you need your cover.
Right, exactly. So, or they can't just reach out the window and shoot you. So every time I would do that, because it's a habit that has to be broken, right? New habit has to be created. I had a FTO that would literally reach across and smack me on the back of the head and say, "You just got shot." And a couple smacks to the back of the head, you learn to stop doing that, right? You could never get away with that today, ever. Now that FTO was one of my instructors in the academy, and he was really heavily into defensive tactics, physical fitness, jujitsu, ground fighting, all of that stuff. So he brought to the table a wealth of officer safety knowledge. And I feel very fortunate that I had him. A lot of people hated him. They thought he was arrogant. They thought he was this. But I'm like, no, he was confident. First of all, there's a difference. And looking back, some of those things he taught me probably saved my life at some point in my career. Then I had another FTO who I absolutely hated his guts. I mean, hated his guts. He would purposely, stress me out, yelling and screaming, no, turn here at the last minute. And then he would just get me really, really frazzled. And I hated it because I felt like, this job is stressful enough. I'm already stressed out enough. And you're just throwing, fuel onto the fire. Mm-hmm. It wasn't long after I got off FTO that I realized what a huge favor he had done me. I wasn't even off the road a month on my own when I was the closest officer to a shooting call. And I was there in seconds. I was right around the corner. And this guy's got bullet holes all in him. And I don't know where the bad guy went, or if he was still there. And I'm trying to get a description and I'm trying to call in units. And it was really, really stressful, and it was in a grocery store parking lot at like 7:00 in the evening. So it was a lot of people around. Right. And I'm trying to figure out, where the bad guy go? Is the bad guy still here? Anyway, long story short, once that call was under control, they flew the victim out. That FTO that I hated so much, he called me and he said, I heard you on the radio. He goes, that was perfect. That was perfect. He goes, you weren't screaming. You weren't, hysterical. You were calm. Everybody knew where you were, what was going on, and what you needed. And he goes, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. And I was like, wow. And then it was like, okay, he stressed me out so that I could learn to be calm when the real shit hit the fan. Right. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And he ended up being, I just saw him not that long ago, even though I'm retired. And, he was like, so how's retired life? I'm like, it's actually pretty good. When the hell are you going to retire? But he's in K9 and he loves it. So I don't know that he'll probably retire when his dog does. It would be my guess. But
that's a lot like going through boot camp, especially as a Marine. Those drill instructors are there to stress you out. So they completely break you and they rebuild you and they train you to put you in situations to remain calm and to have that discipline and to be able to engage in situations that many would either run away from or not handle it the right way, having that fight or flight mentality or whatever it may be, or to just go off and do something that's not good. Like,
right. Well, I mean, think about it.
Like pull your weapon and prematurely shoot, or, do something that you're going to later regret because you were, perhaps so scared. But to the layman, like, why did you pull your weapon on something you shouldn't have pulled it on? You got to remain calm, cool, collective, get all the information and know, it's very hard being a police officer, especially in today's day and age when you got cell phones on you every step you take, and you literally have a target on your back, and you don't know a lot of those situations. A lot of people wouldn't know what to do unless you're completely put into that situation. So, again, that training you put to work and you essentially pass that test. And even though you were out of police academy, mentally you said, now I'm really graduated. I've been in the situation. I showed that I can prove my worth as a female police officer in a career field that is often filled by men. And I did it. And I did it well. So again, kudos to you on that. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there's the terminology of sink or swim. You got to sink or swim. And in law enforcement, in real life situations, that's not the time to figure out if you can sink or swim. You need to already know how to swim by then. The time to learn on whether or not you're going to sink or swim is in the academy or FTO, because whatever gets through the academy, FTO will filter. If they're not going to make it, FTO usually filters them out and they won't make it through the FTO process. Right. So the real work starts in the FTO process. The academy is nothing more than book work, honestly, when you think about it. It's knowing the laws, but FTO is where you learn how to apply it in stressful situations. So
Sure. And you were diagnosed in 2017 with having post-traumatic stress.
Right.
And I want to dedicate this next 30 minutes in talking about the mental health aspect of what you do, how you essentially were to be diagnosed with this. And it was probably as a direct result of being a police officer.
Mostly, yeah.
Can you describe your career all the way up into 2017 when you were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and how did you get there? What were the moments that led up to that point to where you said, you know what, I need help. I think I may have post-traumatic stress. I'm going to the doctor, and yes, I was diagnosed with this. And what have you done to improve your life for the betterment of Donna Michaels?
Yeah, no, well, I don't really want to go into too much detail about this, but I need to put it out there. My first duty station prior to getting to the SEAL unit, I did go through a traumatic event that I did not handle properly. I chose to ignore it. I chose to bury it. I chose to pretend it was a bad dream and it never happened. So I never processed it and I never dealt with it. It just stuffed it right deep down. As the years went by, I'll be straight. I truly had, you lie to yourself enough, you begin to believe the lies, right? So as the years went by, to me, it was just a bad dream. It never really happened. But I did have nightmares, about it. And that's all they were. They were just nightmares. So fast forward to law enforcement, and it's not one call. It's the difference between acute PTSD and complex PTSD. Acute PTSD is much like what combat veterans get, where it's one major incident, whether it's a roadside bomb or, your best friend gets shot and killed next to you, or it's one huge traumatic incident, right? Complex PTSD is what first responders get, where, okay, we go to a car crash call and it's a really bad one. And yeah, it sucks. But this is the job. This is what we signed up for. And on to the next call we go. Well, it's like this. It's like if somebody's, pushes my hand like this, it doesn't hurt. But if somebody were to just keep doing it for 17 years, after a while, I'm going to have a big bruise there, right? If it just keeps happening. And that's what complex PTSD is, because as first responders, and I want to include firefighters in this, we never get a break. We keep going through those same intersections. Combat veterans get to come home from where they leave the traumas behind, where they occurred. There's no, visual trigger per se. Whereas with us, it could be an intersection. It could be a street. It could be, for me, it was water, because my first child death was a drowning. So I became extraordinarily hypervigilant anytime I was somewhere where there was water. And it just happened the other day. My daughter and I were at the beach. There was like a 2-year-old running on the beach, having a grand old time. There's a hurricane out in the ocean. You can't see it. It was a beautiful day for us, but the surf was rough and the undertow was strong. And this mom was playing on her phone, not a child who's playing around in the water, who could have easily gotten swept up by a wave. And I'm sitting there trying to relax on the beach, and I feel my anxiety building, because I'm looking at this mom and I'm looking at this baby, and I'm like, lady, pay attention to your kid, get out there. It happens really fast. But as first responders, we know how fast it happens. Regular people have the blessing of ignorance, I guess, because they haven't been exposed to the same things we have. So that's just an example, though. But So throughout my career, my first child death was a drowning, which made me hypervigilant around water and pools. And we were in Orlando, so the water parks, I mean, water's everywhere, right? And then the car crashes. The really horrific car crash I wasn't on the job very long. It was on Interstate 4, which is our main interstate that runs from Tampa to Daytona Beach and right through Orlando. It's by far one of the busiest interstates in Florida. And I would do anything to avoid getting on that interstate because there's crashes on it all the time and it's crazy. And it keeps going on and on and on. And as the years go by, it seems like there's triggers everywhere, whether it's a smell, whether it's a certain road, whether it's water, in my case, it builds. So, and you just keep telling yourself the same thing over and over again, this is the job, this is what I signed up for. And you just stuff it down in that. I like to call it the little black box of traumas. That for me, that's my expression. And I would just file it away in my little black box, put it in the back of my brain, put the padlock on it and forget about it and go on to the next. In 2017, June 1st, it was the first day of summer. Kids were out of school and I responded to a call of a 2-year-old drowning, and Florida leads, unfortunately, in drownings, and so they're not uncommon and they never get easier. But I go to a call, involves a 2-year-old, and we go through the door and there's a mom with a knife and she's suicidal. So we're having a fight with her to get the knife away from her so we can get to the 2-year-old and render aid, where the witness that called was actually a neighbor who had jumped the wall. And he's on the phone with 911 and we're trying to get to him to help him with the baby. Anyway, long story short, there was something about that call. And I had been on calls with suicidal parents before. We had one that was horrible. We were at gunpoint with her when her 13-year-old daughter hung herself in the garage. And the mom asked to go to the bathroom and came out with a gun to her head. And now we're in a standoff. It just, it kind of like one call, reminds you of that call or reminds you of something else. And then it all kind of mishmash together in your brain. So on June 1st, that particular call with the 2-year-old drowning for me was like somebody put C4 on my little black box of traumas. It blew it up into pieces. There was no stuffing anything back in it. And every traumatic call that I had ever been on in my career got loose in my brain. And I was hearing the screams of the mothers. I was seeing the faces of the deceased. I was feeling the emotions as a mother myself now, right? Because I had become a mom and my daughter in 17 was 11. So, that teenager suicide really messed me up because my daughter was entering middle school at the time. And middle school is horrible for all kids, right? So it just really, it gets in your head and it's really difficult to separate your personal life from your professional because of all the things that you see. And now you're a parent yourself and it's impossible not to question, what if this was my child? What if this was my family? Should we? Yes, we should do that, but we're not robots. We have hearts, we have emotions, it's nearly impossible to naturally divide. And that's where the professional help comes in, because you got to have a way to process those traumas so that you don't constantly, what I like to call troubleshoot in your sleep, which is where the nightmares come from. That's your subconscious trying to work through those traumas to make rhyme or reason or sense out of them so that you don't constantly carry that heavy weight. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to get to that crisis moment, to where you have a complete nervous breakdown over years and years and years of complex trauma, the complex post-traumatic stress that you were talking about. Because look, let's face it, you guys are in combat every day. Whether it's guns, car accidents, stabbings, rapes,
people surrounding you in a crowd. I mean, it's all stressful these days, all of it.
Yeah. But it truly is. And unfortunately, I'm not going to say everybody, but I'm going to say, unfortunately, in today's world, a lot of folks out there don't respect the authority. They don't respect the law and order. They don't respect police officers. And you guys are put into situations. You guys are put into situations every single day where it's life and death. And you are human. You are human. You have emotions and you have feelings and, you have traumatic type events that happen. And all you're trying to do is serve your community with honor And what you're getting in return a lot of the times is being disrespected. And that has got to take a toll on a police officer, especially when you know you're out there doing the right thing for the betterment of the community, to make it a safer place for everybody to live.
Like we literally just want to help, and they won't let you help. Yeah. That's you literally just trying to help. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, look, this is something that I have been saying on my podcast. I started this 45 days ago, and I've said it a lot. It's okay to not be okay. Yep. That is what I hear 24/7, 365. We just lost another veteran last night. I just got the alert not long ago. I get hundreds of emails per week because I guess I've become the name and the face of the VA reform and VA policy, which is good and bad. I like to help people and return their emails, but also, unfortunately, I get to hear all the bad stuff that happens, and it's a lot. And the VA is not all bad. I'm not anti-VA. I am here to say that there is a lot of help that they need, and there is a lot that they can do better to better serve, a very, great, a population that's at risk, an at-risk population. And everybody always says, from the state level, the federal level, from churches to schools, mental health, the stigma, it's okay to not be okay. But I'm going to tell you it's not, because I know people that have lost their jobs recently because they have post-traumatic stress on their medical record. And so how do they find out? Well, they do an audit. Okay, whether they work for the feds or they work for the state or they work for a school district, or if they work down at the local, sheriff's office, whatever it may be. And they have post-traumatic stress on their medical record. Through an audit, they find out, they sit that person down and say, you are no longer going to be an asset for us because you have wounds. And where do those wounds come from? Well, let's see, perhaps serving my country, perhaps serving my state, my county, my city, my community. So instead of sitting down with that person who is not feeling well, who is now asking for help to get them through their traumatic type situations, through whether it's through medication or through counseling or whatever it may be, they're forced out. They are forced out and they're pretty much thrown on the streets. Their livelihoods are stripped away from them. And now their life is unraveling faster than they can even think of. They look in the mirror one day and they're a police officer or a fireman or in the military and living their life. And then the next, they are broken. And now they are at risk for suicide, because now they say it's okay to not be okay. So they come out and they say, hey, I'm not okay, but I want to be okay. Well, as soon as you say that, you're done. You're targeted, you're labeled, and now your livelihood has been taken away from you in ways that you can't get back. You can't get it back. What is it like as a police officer to go to your lieutenant, to go to your sergeant and say, I'm not feeling well, I need some help, can you help me? Without them labeling you as somebody, as a weak body or somebody that can't handle the job. Because I can tell you right now, I know a lot of strong men out there. I know airline pilots who have recently lost their job because they can't fly anymore, because they pulled their license because of combat experiences that they did while serving our country. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? That pilot's been flying for 20 years, but now he is no longer good for us. He's no longer good enough. He's no longer good enough because he served his country with honor, and he's not okay. Okay, but he's doing everything he can to be okay. So he's taking his meds. He's going to counseling. So he has proved that he is fit for service. But because you audit him and you say you're no longer good enough for us, and we're firing you because of post-traumatic stress. I'm sorry, but that is wrong. And now more and more people are saying, I can't come out. I can't come out and say that I have a problem because I'm going to lose my job. And if I lose my job, my problem is going to be bigger than what it is right now. It's going to spiral out of control. It's going to put me on my knees, and I will end up doing something wrong, like taking my own life or living a life of self-isolation, never coming out anymore, and not being a contributor to society the way that you could be, because everybody has let you down from the top of the system all the way down to the bottom. And I want to know from you, as a retired police officer, what is going on in the ranks of today's police officers, and is it okay to not be okay?
Wow. It was really hard to not interrupt you just then, because you hit so many points that I was just like, just you probably could tell I was dying to say something, but I wanted to let you finish. So first and foremost, I did not go to my chain of command to report my issues. I was one of those officers afraid of asking for help because I knew about the stigma. In fact, I was so deep in it that I was in denial that I had PTSD. For your male viewers out there, I apologize. I'm a woman. I went to my gynecologist to ask for a hormone check because I thought I was wanting to blame it on anything but PTSD. So I'm like, well, maybe it's menopause. Maybe there's something, maybe my hormones are out of balance. So I'm getting lab work. And my doctor told me, he goes, Donna, you do not have, he goes, I'll run the test for you because I'm telling you, you're in clinical depression. You need mental health help. I was sobbing. I was hiding from my coworkers. I was canceling my backup. I was at home in the fetal position crying. I had a plan to commit suicide. So when I tell you I broke in 2017, I'm talking I broke and I could not function. And I put my child on a plane. I sent her out of state and I had a plan. The only reason I am still sitting here right now is because my final phone call to that best friend that I expected to leave a voicemail with, because he was like the world's worst at answering his phone. But for some reason, that particular Saturday, he answered his phone. As soon as he heard my voice, I started sobbing immediately because I didn't expect him to answer. I was going to leave a voicemail. And he knew right away. He's a combat veteran himself. He has PTSD himself, and he spent 8 hours on the phone with me as a combat veteran, telling me that it was okay what I was going through, that I was not alone, that some of the strongest men I knew, including himself, have been where I am right now, have already had their dark moments, right? And he convinced me that it was okay to ask for help. And I said, no, they're going to Baker Act me, which in Florida basically means take you to the local mental hospital, somewhere that I've taken, I don't know, hundreds of people in my career. And I don't want to go there. That's like my worst fear, right? So I'm like, no, they're going to Baker Act me. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my career. They're going to consider me incompetent. So I was one of those people who refused to ask for help for fear of the humiliation, shame, and embarrassment. So he said, no, there's a way to do it on the down low where you can get help. It might cost you a little money, but there are plenty of resources out there. So gave me a couple phone numbers that people I could trust who could kind of coach me through it, who knew somebody. And as I started going through this process, I started talking to somebody on my own, under the radar. Because like you said, the audit, had I gone to my agency, even if I hadn't said something to my chain of command, even if I had gone to a doctor on my own, we were a self-insured agency. And they see everybody's medical bills. They know where they're going. They know what meds they're taking. So I didn't want to go through them because I didn't trust HR or anybody to do the right thing. Now, mind you, keep in mind, this is 2017. Okay. So I start getting help on the down low on my own. Fast forward a few months into October, and I'm in a class, and there was a combat Marine teaching the class who had been a sex crimes detective for over a decade. And he had a service dog. Now, he worked for a different agency than me. And he had a service dog because his night terrors were so bad that it had caused heart damage. And his dog was trained to wake him up from his night terrors. so that it would not do any further damage to his heart. So he was teaching this class, and it was a law enforcement therapy dog course. And if Bubba's not back there, but a few minutes ago, you might have seen my shepherd sitting there. He was a puppy. I had just gotten him. And one of my other brothers gave him to him because he knew I was struggling and I had just lost my shepherd. So he's like, look, I got this pup. He needs a home. So like all these angels came into my world and saw that I was struggling and helped me. And they were all veterans, all of them. Mm-hmm. And none of them were cops, and except for Jesse, the instructor. So he pulls me to the side at lunchtime, and he said to me, didn't you say you were in the military? And I'm like, yeah, so? And he goes, something happened when you were in the military? And I'm like, nobody had ever asked me, ever. And I just, my eyes, and I remember I'm still struggling at this point. So it didn't take much for the waterworks to start, right? So I start tearing up, and I'm like, how did you know? He said, because your dog is feeding off your anxiety. He goes, your dog is trying to he's doing his job, and I can't think of the word right now, but he was trying to give me pressure therapy. It's an instinctual thing that they do. They feel our anxiety and they try to comfort. He was trying to comfort me, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't understand what my dog was doing. I thought he was misbehaving, and I just kept trying to correct him. And then the anxiety kept doing this. So Jesse's like, we started talking. And for the first time in my life, I told somebody what had happened to me in the military. Mm-hmm. And he told me, I want you to take the rest of the day off. He goes, what's happening in the second half of the day? He goes, you've been a cop 17 years. You already know this stuff. He said, I want you to go to the VA. He goes, and I want you to go in there and I want you to talk to somebody. And I'm like, they're not going to talk to me. I'm like, I've never been raided. I've never, I don't have a card. I have no VA benefits. He's like, trust me, you go down there, you tell them what you went through. He goes, there's a program for women just like you. Mm-hmm. So I went down to the VA at lunch, and I'm standing there at the walk-up window, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say. And the lady's like, okay, can I see your ID card? I don't have one. Okay, social security number. And I give it to her. She goes, ma'am, you're not in the system. What do you want me to do? Do you work? Because, they'll treat people who don't work and don't have insurance. And I'm like, yeah, I work, I'm a cop. And she says, so do you have insurance? I go, yeah. She goes, well, like, we can't help you. I don't understand why you're here. And the tears are just filling up my eyes. And I suddenly saw a banner behind her, and I just pointed at it because I couldn't get the words to come out of my mouth. So I pointed at the banner, and she said, have a seat. I'll be right back. Within 20 minutes, I was in an office with a psychologist talking about everything. And they put me under what was called like a hardship program. So I was immediately getting care by the VA while I was trying to get my benefits. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And that, of course, took forever, as you know, but at least I was getting help. And it was while I was in the VA that I got treatment. It didn't cost me anything. And like I said, everything seemed to kind of like come into my path for a reason. And it was, I know, like you said, the VA is not perfect. I've heard horror stories, but they were wonderful to me. I've got nothing bad to say. So I started getting treatment. Well, then fast forward to 2018, and Governor DeSantis, God bless his heart, we love our governor. They passed a PTSD bill for first responders in Florida. So it became a work-related injury. And I still didn't trust the agency. But because by now I was getting the help I needed, I was on medication, I was functioning much better. And I was kind of, as far as anybody knew, I was back to my normal self, but they never really knew in the first place that I'd gone through those few months of deep depression. Mm-hmm. But I was functioning. I was doing my job. And in 2019, I had an opportunity to go out to Texas to get some treatment through Boot Campaign, which is a nonprofit organization that Morgan Luttrell started. And it's on, I'll get that in a minute. Their link is on my website. So I had to go to the agency and tell them I needed time off to go get this state-of-the-art treatment. It was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get. And I had to tell them what was wrong with me and why I wanted to go. And at this point, with the bill being passed, and this is now 2019, I told them that I had been diagnosed in 2017. So they have 2 years of me plus 17 years prior to that of me really doing my job, like you said, with no major incidents. So they couldn't really fire me if I didn't do anything wrong, right? But I still needed help. And I told him, yes, I have been suicidal. I just knew better than to ask you guys for help, or that would have been the end of my career. So I sought help on my own. Well, there's really nothing they could do about it. If they'd have fired me, I could have sued them because of the law that had passed. So they didn't grant me the authorization to go to Texas. Workman's Comp wouldn't do that. But what they would do is they put me in treatment here locally. And I started getting help through the agency, under the new bill. I still go to the VA. I do have my rating now. I have all my VA benefits. It took 3 years to get them, but I finally got them. And now that I'm retired, I use them I don't have any health insurance from my employer, so I use the VA for my health insurance. But so that's my story. And I will tell you that when I told people what I had been through, they were incredibly surprised. And when I retired 4 years, we're supposed to do 25 years here. And I was starting to make really bad mistakes towards the last year and a half of my career. I was making really stupid mistakes, like forgetting my body cam, forgetting my radio, forgetting my cell phone, just dumb stuff. And I just couldn't figure out. I mean, I was going to work every day and I couldn't remember people's names. I was starting to have really bad memory issues and I needed answers. So I finally got that trip to Texas. I took my own time to go, and they did a 3-day brain scans of me. And they found that not only did I have PTSD, but I also had a traumatic brain injury. And that was the result of a car crash I was in on duty in 2016, the year before the PTSD hit. And now they're saying that TBIs and PTSD can often be connected. A TBI makes you more susceptible to get PTSD. Not 100%. I mean, doesn't mean you can't get PTSD without a TBI. Of course you can. But if you have a TBI, it definitely increases your odds. So so the doctor in Texas told me that I had a TBI, and that was the reason for my short-term memory issues that were really getting bad. So I came back and I had my 100% VA rating by this point, and I could afford to walk away early from my retirement. And that's what I did. I walked away and everybody was in shock. They're like, why are you leaving? You've only got 4 more years. And I said, because I know if I stay, I want to leave on my terms. I know if I stay, I'm going to do something stupid that's probably going to get me in trouble. I'm probably going to lose my temper, tell one of these yahoos like you were talking about to go F themselves, right? At some point, somebody's going to trigger me and I'm going to lose my crap. As I gotten older, my fuse has gotten shorter. And I think that goes for all of us, right? We just cannot tolerate so much stupidity. And it seems like there's a plethora of that these days. Like what you were talking about, you're trying to help people and they just want to give you a hard time. And I was getting very short fused for that. So I was like, you know what, before this gets any worse, I'm going to walk out with my head held high on my terms, then rather than stay and then make a mistake that's going to end up making me leave under a cloud of whatever, right? And that's what I did. I left 4 years early, and I have absolutely no regrets. It was time for me to go. It was just, it was fun. But that's it pretty much.
Yeah, no, I sincerely appreciate the time you've given us today and telling your story. We've got to wrap this here. To just kind of reiterate, what we've talked about, traumatic events happen to everybody. They happen every day. And life is full of challenges. Life is hard, and it should be okay to not be okay. And you can still live a life of contribution and honor to your community, and just be somebody that is going to be that champion. And you can do that with post-traumatic stress.
Absolutely.
You can do that with anxiety. You can do that with depression. And you should never lose your job because of the stresses of the job that you have been forced to do. So, again, I sincerely appreciate your time and your efforts of coming on here and opening yourself up and showing your vulnerability. And I know I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours on this, but we are at the 1 hour mark here. I did want to plug your book here really quick, guys. If you want to learn more about Donna Michaels, she has a book. It's available on Amazon. It's titled Courageously Broken. It's a great book. If you have some time today, go pick it up and give it a read. But, other than that, Thank you for joining us today, Donna. We sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do for your community and our great nation. Your service, sacrifice, and dedication is true.